So the path does not die by Pete Hollis. Chapter 1. The main narrative begins with Finaba Marah Fina as a child in Talaba. Her grandmother Baramusu, a respected elder and traditionalist, visits her mother Nabu to insist that Fina must undergo female initiation excision to become a Musuba, a real woman. Nabu resists, citing the death of her first daughter, Demusu, after her own initiation. She wants Fina to focus on school, not traditions. Baramusu warns that without initiation, Fina will never belong among her peers and will be excluded from dances, songs, and marriage. Later, she tells Fina the story of Masudugyu, the prologue's myth, as a way of teaching her about tradition. She also reminds Fina of her destiny as a Yelaba storyteller and leader chosen by the ancestors. Finally, despite Nabu's protests, Baramusu secretly takes Fina into the forest to begin initiation, marking her body with kaolin and preparing her for the rite that kills a child and gives birth to a woman. Chapter 2. The initiation ceremony turns tragic. Fina experiences terrifying visions and intense pain, but instead of completing the rite, her father Amada storms into the forbidden Fafe initiation house to rescue her, an act considered a grave taboo. He pulls her out, defying tradition. This causes uproar. The women's society condemns Amadu and demands purification rituals for the community. Fina, recovering in the clinic, feels shame and isolation. She has not become a real woman like her peers. Meanwhile, memories of Daimusu's mysterious death after initiation haunt the family. Hilapa Yada had once declared Demusu and Fina to be Denkalani children sent by the ancestors to show the path but destined to return after their work is done. Baramusu interprets Daimusu's death as proof that the old ways must be followed, while Naba and Amada see it as proof that cutting is harmful. The village divides bitterly. After Naba violently disperses the purification women with Amaju's machete, the family becomes outcasts. They are forced to leave Talaba immediately, heading for Freetown. Chapter 3. In Freetown, the family struggles to rebuild. They stay with Amaju's wealthy uncle, Alhaji Umaru, who helps Amada find work through his government connections. Amadi works for Pa Christian Hedel, a corrupt civil servant, while Naba starts petty trading. Soon, Amadu is drawn into selling construction materials from Pa Hedel's project with the help of Mamajina, a food seller. This extra income allows the family to rent their own small apartment, and Naba enrolls Fina in school. But tragedy strikes. Amadu injures his foot on rusty iron and dies of tetanus, too afraid to leave work without permission from Pa Hedel. His death leaves Naba destitute. Pa Hedel offers small financial help, then proposes that Fina move in with his family to ease Nabu's burden. Reluctantly, Nabu agrees. Fina becomes Fina in the Hedel household, renamed and absorbed into their world of privilege and competition. Though treated fairly on the surface, she suffers exclusion and bullying from Pa Hedel's children, particularly Ade. The chapter closes with Fina's painful adjustment, learning to survive through silence, obedience, and endurance while mourning her lost home, her father, and her sense of belonging. Chapter 4. In Chapter 4, Fina is relocated from her mother's immediate protection into the home of the Hedels, a respectable middle-class family in Freetown. Although they present themselves as progressive Christians, it becomes immediately clear that Fina is not received as a daughter, but rather as a low-ranking dependent. Expected to assimilate silently, obey scrupulously, and show gratitude without question. The outward civility of the Hedels disguises a deeper emotional coldness and class-based superiority. The children, especially Ade, mock Fina as a primitive village girl. She learns, quickly and quietly, that survival in this new world demands invisibility, emotional restraint, and absolute self-control. Thus, Chapter 4 marks the beginning of her education in social respectability, hypocrisy, and silent endurance. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 explores Fina's entry into formal schooling in Freetown, where she immediately begins to excel academically, despite the psychological burden of being marked as socially inferior. Yet even within the supposedly modern and educated space of the school, cultural prejudice persists. Other girls condemn her for not being initiated, reinforcing that the politics of womanhood follow her everywhere. Fina is now caught between two worlds, rejected by tradition yet not fully accepted by modernity, and must therefore forge her own identity without guidance. The most striking feature of this chapter is her shift from passive humiliation to quiet psychological awakening as she begins to observe the world critically rather than merely suffer it. Chapter 6 marks Fina's transition into adolescence, where the politics of gender become personal rather than theoretical. She becomes acutely aware of how women's bodies are constantly watched, evaluated, and socially priced. For the first time, she experiences both the possibility of romantic attraction and the very real danger of male desire. She also witnesses how the city commodifies young women far more subtly through charm, persuasion, and opportunity rather than open coercion. At the same time, her exposure to political and religious elites through the Hedel household broadens her awareness of how power operates. This chapter represents the birth of her analytical consciousness, as desire, danger, and ambition all begin to coexist in her mind. Chapter 7. In Chapter 7, Fina is drawn emotionally into her first experience of affection or idealistic love, a feeling that awakens both longing and confusion. But this awakening is overshadowed by the threat of sexual exploitation from someone within her social or household environment. A grim reminder that womanhood in her world is not chosen but imposed. She now grasps that morality, obedience, and invisibility offer no protection against male entitlement. Emotional awareness and danger emerge simultaneously, and Chapter 7 closes with a decisive psychological transition. Fina understands that survival requires intelligence, not innocence, and that silence is no longer enough. She must begin preparing herself. Chapter 8 relocates Fina into another guardian household, this time under Auntie Safi, where she is openly treated as domestic labor rather than a child. Unlike the polished hypocrisy of the Hedels, this space is a pure arrangement of power and utility. Affection is not even simulated. Fina becomes a silent worker rising before dawn, serving without complaint, but instead of being crushed, she grows more observant. For the first time, she realizes that many girls like her exist floating between households, never belonging, always needed but never valued. The chapter exposes the hidden economy of unacknowledged girl labor that sustains respectable society and reveals how Fina's suffering is not personal misfortune but part of a systemic pattern. Chapter 9. In Chapter 9, the city's full moral reality becomes visible to Fina. She sees the lives of women in the markets, in homes, and on the streets, observing how poverty and survival force many into transactional or sexual vulnerability. She becomes deeply aware that a single rumor, a single mistake, or a single man's desire can destroy a girl's future. Yet this chapter is not about fear alone. It is about awakening. Fina develops a form of sharp, silent watchfulness. She begins decoding hypocrisy, realizing that modernity merely disguises the same dangers that tradition made obvious. The chapter ends with her transition from emotional passivity to mental strategy. Chapter 10. Chapter 10 offers a moment of hope. At school, Fina's intelligence is finally recognized and affirmed. Academically, she is beginning to rise, and for the first time, an adult acknowledges her future rather than just her obedience. But this progress is immediately shadowed by deepening social danger. A male figure, someone in the household or socially powerful, begins approaching her with growing boldness. Nothing happens yet, but Fina understands the language of threat instantly. She now knows that intelligence and caution must go hand in hand. Chapter 10 is therefore a chapter of dual awakening, intellectual opportunity on one side, sexual peril on the other. Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is a hinge moment. Fina's potential is now recognized. A teacher or mentor figure sees her as a mind, not merely as labor or burden, introducing the possibility of a future beyond survival. This awakens a new internal fire, hope. Yet, at the same time, a male presence within her domestic or social space begins crossing dangerous boundaries, signaling that her vulnerability is reaching its peak. The chapter balances possibility and threat. Her intellectual path opens just as her physical safety closes in. From this moment, Fina's survival mode evolves into deliberate strategy. She no longer merely endures, she begins to calculate. Chapter 12. Fina and her fiancé, Cami, are living in the United States. They are well known in the African and Caribbean communities of Washington, D.C., and their wedding is the talk of the town. Everyone wants to attend, whether invited or not, because it's a big social event. Guests fly in, rent luxury cars, wear fancy clothes, and spend lavishly to show off their success in America. The wedding is meant to be a grand celebration of love, wealth, and immigrant achievement, costing about $40,000 and attracting hundreds of people. Fina, however, feels the heavy contrast between this extravagance and her sister Isa's struggles back home in Sierra Leone, where Isa can barely afford food and dreams of taking a computer course. Chapter 13. The wedding begins with glamour and style. Fina walks down the aisle in a beautiful cream silk gown, wearing a Nubian headpiece and holding a bouquet of sunset-colored roses, her personal choice. The congregation sings hymns, and Fina feels both joy and sadness. Her parents are dead, Isa couldn't get a visa, and only Edna, her foster sister, represents family on her side. As the pastor asks if anyone knows why the marriage should not go on, a man interrupts the ceremony. He presents a marriage certificate, claiming Fina is still legally married to him. The congregation is shocked. Gossip, judgment, and confusion spread quickly among the guests. Chapter 14. After the disruption, Fina retreats with Cami to the vestry, a private church room. Cami is furious, demanding answers. He feels humiliated in front of everyone and accuses Fina of dishonesty. Fina, exhausted and overwhelmed, admits she had once married another man to secure her U.S. green card, but insists she divorced him. She even shows Cami the divorce decree she brought with her, sensing beforehand that something might go wrong. Cami is still angry, accusing her of secrecy and lack of trust. Their heated argument reveals cracks in their relationship, with both sides feeling betrayed. Chapter 15. After Cami storms out, Edna comes in to comfort Fina. Fina breaks down, asking why bad things always happen to her, losing her parents, her sister not being able to come, and now her wedding ruined. She begins to believe her grandmother Baramusu cursed her years ago when her father pulled her out of initiation. She tells Edna that she has felt out of place everywhere in her grandmother's world, in the Hedel household, at school, and even now in America. She feels like she carries misfortune wherever she goes. Edna tries to reassure her, but Fina sinks deeper into self-pity, questioning her identity, her past, and whether she will ever truly belong anywhere. Chapter 16. After the disastrous wedding interruption, Cami's house fills with family and friends who are curious, concerned, and gossiping. They don't know what to do with all the wedding gifts and wonder if the ceremony will be rescheduled. Cami arrives home, feeling humiliated and exhausted. Relatives smother him with pity and advice, while whispers about Fina's past and the wedding scandal spread like wildfire. Cami briefly thanks everyone but avoids going into detail. Meanwhile, Fina, still shaken, vents to her friend Arman about her frustrations with America, racism, her career struggles, and her sense of being trapped. She admits she is tired and longs to return to Sierra Leone, where she might feel whole again. Chapter 17. Later, Fina sits with Arman and reflects on her deep longing for home. She imagines sitting under the baobab tree in her village, hearing mosquitoes buzz, tasting mango juice, and smelling palm oil cooking. Her memories bring back her family, especially her father and grandmother Baramusu. She regrets that she never got to say goodbye to them, especially after her father risked everything to save her from initiation. Fina confesses that she still feels her family's exile was unresolved because no one ever returned to make amends with the ancestors. This sparks a determination in her. She wants to go back to Talaba, her birthplace, and set things straight. For the first time in a while, she feels hopeful. Chapter 18. Meanwhile, Cami faces a shocking revelation. A young man named Glenn Gibson appears, claiming to be his son. Cami recalls how, years ago, his mother Celeste sent away a girl, Anushka Mutari, who had accused him of fathering her baby. At the time, he believed she was lying, but the evidence now points otherwise. Glenn is about 21, which matches the timeline and even resembles Cami's late brother Donovan. Cami feels conflicted but strangely drawn to the idea of fatherhood. Glenn explains that he was adopted, grew up in Florida, and only recently discovered his biological roots. To complicate matters, Glenn is gravely ill, his kidneys are failing, and he needs a transplant. Cami is shaken, caught between disbelief, guilt, and the sudden responsibility of being a father. Chapter 19. Fina and Cami begin to talk again. Fina confesses everything about her past marriage to Jamal, how it was only for immigration papers, and how she divorced him. Cami listens, but then reveals his own secret. Glenn, the young man, is his son. He admits he had not known for sure until now. Fina is stunned but tells him that he has a duty to help Glenn, especially since the young man's life depends on it. This leaves Cammy feeling torn between his pride, his family's reputation, and the moral obligation to save his son's life. Meanwhile, Fina's stomach pain worsens, symbolizing the heavy emotional and physical toll all these revelations are taking on her. Chapter 20. Fina begins planning her return to Sierra Leone. Despite the uncertainty of what she will find, she feels determined to go back to her roots and reconnect with her past. She wants to face her village, Talaba, and make peace with the ancestors, believing this will free her from the burden of shame and the curse she feels has followed her since childhood. Chapter 21. Fina arrives in Sierra Leone and is struck by the mix of familiarity and change. The streets of Freetown are crowded, noisy, and full of life. She reconnects with Edna, who welcomes her warmly, and they share stories of the years apart. Fina asks about ISA, only to learn that ISA's life has grown more difficult. Poverty and struggle continue to define her existence. Fina feels guilty for living abroad while her sister endured hardship. Memories of their childhood flood back, both the joy and the pain of being outsiders after leaving Talaba. The reunion with Edna is comforting, but Fina knows she cannot stop in Freetown. She must go further, back to Talaba itself, to confront the unfinished business of her past. Chapter 22. Fina makes the difficult journey to Talaba, her ancestral village. The road is rough, and her heart pounds with anxiety as she nears the place of her childhood exile. She wonders if the villagers will welcome her or reject her again. Upon arrival, she finds that many things are unchanged, the same rhythms of village life, the same traditions guiding the people. She visits the family compound, and memories of her grandmother Baramusu, her father Amadu, and her mother Naba rush back. She feels the weight of their choices, the defiance that led to exile, the sacrifices they made, and the shame that lingered. Villagers eye her curiously, some with suspicion, others with cautious warmth. Fina realizes this homecoming will not be simple. She must prove herself and seek the ancestors' forgiveness if she is to find peace. Chapter 23. Fina's return to Talaba culminates in a visit to the sacred grove, the place where her life's path first diverged, where her father pulled her from initiation and sealed her fate as an outcast. Standing there again, Fina is overwhelmed by emotion. She feels the presence of her ancestors, the echo of her grandmother's warnings, and the memory of her father's defiance. In a symbolic act, she kneels, offers prayers, and seeks reconciliation. She asks forgiveness not only for herself but for her family who carried the burden of exile. The moment is both painful and liberating. By returning to the place of rupture and facing it directly, Fina begins to heal. Though she knows the scars of the past will remain, she feels a measure of peace, as if the path that was broken long ago is slowly reconnecting.